A deal on Dickens, who could resist? A stack of Austen, warmly kissed. Golden Age crime tales twist and turn, every page a treasure to learn. Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea, reading always feels so free.
Hi, Editing Talia here. I just want to mention that this video, this book review that you'll be seeing momentarily, was recorded prior to the group discussion that I was involved with several other people that is posted on Ghost Readers in the Sky channel. And I do highly recommend you check out that panel of booktubers discussing the book. I'm on there. My mom, Marlisa's Meanderings, is on there. Gavin from Genre Books. Greg from Ghost Readers in the Sky, it's on his channel. And then Deb's from, I think it's Deb Rayner Reads. I'll tag people. But yeah, that's there. I would highly recommend you check out that discussion. This review is what I had. These are my thoughts prior to that discussion. So there might be some repetition and there might be some things that I did not mention in that discussion in this review. So just wanted to provide that context before heading into this review. Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I don't have a whole lot of time before I need to start live streaming for some of my prayers that I do on my other channel, or one of my other channels. But I wanted to try to get in a quick book review. I have a bit of a backlog that I need to record. I'd like to get my 2025 book reviews done before the end of 2025. So, I think that I'm going to review Ivanhoe in this video. So I finished Ivanhoe. Okay, first of all, this was a group read. And this was something, it was Ghost Readers in the Sky. Let's see. Gavin, why am I forgetting? I remember your first name. I don't remember your channel off the top of my head right now. I'll put people's names down below. I don't know why I'm forgetting Gavin's name right now. But several people who I watch, plus Mom, and then I joined in about a week late. Or probably about half a week late. It was a read that was going to take over a course of a month. So it was supposed to be a November read. And I wasn't going to take part initially, even though I had picked up Ivanhoe before Mom had, because I remember enjoying the book so much as a kid. Even though I hadn't read the adult version of Ivanhoe, I had read the Children's Illustrated Classic. And aspects of it had stuck in my head, particularly the character of Rebecca. And I always kind of meant to return to it. And I had hemmed and hawed about joining in. It's a thick book. And I knew that I was going to have trouble finishing the reads I wanted to get in November anyway. But Mom was really enjoying the book and she really wanted to talk to me about it. And so I ended up buckling. And once I got started, I was surprised how quickly it went. Now, I needed a little bit of a kickstart for the little, it was the introduction that was put in, actually, not the one that was put in by the commentator for Oxford World Classics, not that introduction, but the introduction that was written by Sir Walter Scott at the time. I found that a little bit slow going initially, so I borrowed the library book, audiobook from Hoopla, just to get myself over that hump. Once I got past the introduction, I switched back over to the physical book, And although the reader was quite good, but I switched over to the physical book, and honestly, I was having trouble slowing myself down because I kept wanting to see what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? And the characters are definitely ones that are very strong, particularly ones that have a definite personality to them. Of course, there's Cedric, but the swineherder and the jester, and the only reason why I'm not saying their actual names is because I can't quite remember. Wamba is the jester. Now, I always have trouble with the swineherd's name. I know it when I see it. Girth. Girth and Wamba have very definite personalities, as does Rebecca and Isaac. But I find, and then the merry men, Robin Hood's bunch, have different personalities. A little bit less so than the serfs and the Jewish father daughter. But I felt like actually Ivanhoe's interesting because Ivanhoe is the titular character, but for a long time you don't even realize that Ivanhoe is present. And I mean, you realize if you're an observant reader, but Ivanhoe is not revealed to be Ivanhoe right away. It takes a good portion of the novel before he is revealed to be Ivanhoe. Now, all the revelations that were made for hidden characters were ones that I picked up on right away, and I'm not sure if that's because I have read the book before, but even if it was in a kid's version, and so maybe part of that stuck in my head, or if it really was that clear who the characters were, if you happen to have any idea of Robin Hood lore or the kind of tropes of writing. But I thought that this book did a good job of showing the dark side of the chivalric behavior and showing it from an outsider's point of view, but without feeling like it was a modern person judging that point of view. It felt like it was appropriate within the culture because you had Rebecca addressing it from her point of view outside of the culture as a Jewish woman at that time, and a healer. But you have then people like Ivanhoe who are defending this idea of chivalry, but the part of chivalry that I think that we don't think of as much in the modern culture. We think of chivalry and we think of opening doors, and we think of guys doing, really kind of romantic things for women, and just being that kind of thing, being very respectful to women. That's kind of what I think we usually think of for chivalry now. But the chivalric code was something that was instituted to try to keep Christian men at that time from just killing each other. It was not necessarily the most successful thing. That was another reason, one of the other reasons why the Crusades were encouraged as well, to try to reduce the bloodshed among the Christian men at the time, Christian knights, with questionable effects for that, questionable success for that. But so it addressed that aspect of chivalry, the idea of glory, and actually an almost when you think of it, it's almost like a pagan view of the idea of glory, like, oh well, at least I'll go out in this burst of glory, and I'll be remembered in this kind of way. It makes me think almost of Eowyn in Lord of the Rings where she wanted to die a glorious death and be remembered. It feels very much like the Rohirrim, which were based on some of the Nordic ideas. I mean, that was some of Tolkien's influences, were Nordic warriors. And there's some of that feel to that with this the chivalric idea of fighting for glory, and they were like, you protect the women and all that. But some of that more romantic aspect came in with some of the French influences with the Arthurian legends. But this particular story feels a bit earlier on, because it's supposed to be, this is set during Richard's reign. I mean, at this point, the king doesn't even speak. Okay, in the book he speaks English, but in the local language, or a mixture of the two, not true English at that point, but he speaks in the book he speaks something that the average Saxon can speak to him. But in actual life at this time period, Richard never spoke English. Richard only spoke French. He considered himself more attached to Aquitaine, because that's what he was supposed to inherit before his older brother died. And so he never really, I don't think he ever really cared as much about England. I think that he gets very much lionized, pun intended, because of his reputation as a crusader. But anyway, I'm getting way off track. I thought that the darker aspects of chivalry were well represented, and it actually was a thoughtful conversation, but not in a way that felt like it was a modern person going in and wagging their finger at the characters. It felt natural within the culture of the character discussing it with Ivanhoe. And you could see that cultural disconnect, because Rowena, even though as another woman, still saw things from... Sorry, my alarm went off. I won't be able to go much longer. But Rowena, from the point of view of a Saxon Christian woman, with that culture and the influence of the Norman culture on their culture as well, at that point, because at this point you are several generations away from William the Conqueror, because you've got William the Conqueror, you had, I want to say it's his son, then you have Matilda, well, not Matilda technically, I mean Matilda for a little while. You don't want to go into the Stephen Matilda war over the throne. I'm just going to say Matilda to like super simplify it, even though, it wasn't really Matilda. Then you had her son, and then you have his kids, which would be Richard, if I remember the timeline correctly. So that makes it the generations, you are multiple generations down the line from the Norman conquest. So the emphasis on the differences in cultures, I think, might be a little bit overemphasized, but in the commentary they did mention that you can't read this book as being an accurate representation of English history at that time. But I don't feel like that ruins the commentary that the book makes on culture or the greatness of the story. And I'm someone who doesn't usually like historical fiction, because I don't like it when the era doesn't feel like it's done correctly. And even though Sir Walter Scott gets some facts wrong, like Richard only speaking French, in reality, I feel like he gets the feel of the era right. And then the interesting conversation around chivalry and showing that non-romantic side to it, and some of the ugliness of that. The commentary on some of the hypocrisy of the time, particularly when you're dealing with the higher up clergy in the era, where, you know, a lot of times those were second sons who didn't inherit anything, second or third, or, you know, they were not the eldest son. So there would always be one son at least who was slated for the church, and his goal was to get up as high as possible. A lot of times, I mean, sometimes you had guys who then really embraced the vocation, but there were too many guys who saw it as another way to rise through the ranks and amass wealth for themselves. So you saw abuses, because these guys were never meant to be, never should have been religious figures to begin with. But the church was being treated as yet another path for gaining wealth and status, instead of what it should have been treated as. And that's why you would get some of these guys in positions they never should have been in. And I feel like that is shown, even if it isn't outright stated completely, it is shown well in Ivanhoe as well. And even his villain, who, you know, can at times be close to his villains, some of them are close to cartoonishly evil, but then you'll hit something, there's like a little slight bit of nuance there, you know, where he might feel more than you were willing to give him credit for. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I feel like, first, one thing, it's really well written, and you get to a certain point and you just can't stop reading, because you have to see what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? Rebecca is the absolute, you know, no comparison, best character in the whole book. Ivanhoe and Rowena kind of are bland, to be quite honest with you. But even though this is supposedly Ivanhoe's story, Ivanhoe is a central character, but Ivanhoe, he's not quite a plot device, but he's a character, but it's almost like what other people do because of him or around him is more where the interesting parts of the story come in. Rebecca, how Girth behaves because of him, how Cedric's behavior because of him. All these different people who react certain ways or behave certain ways because of Ivanhoe, and then the ripple effect of other characters reacting to those characters who react. Yes, Ivanhoe does things. Yes, Ivanhoe does have a big scene toward the end where he does a dramatic chivalrous act. But I feel that I do like the way that the chivalrous act is handled, though, insofar as he does this act, but it doesn't necessarily end in the way that he might have been the most obviously glorious. Like it's ended more because of something that happens to his opponent versus something that he does, which I think that's interesting. That Ivanhoe's, you know, moment of glory isn't even necessarily a moment, the obvious moment of glory for him. It's the punishment he puts himself through to try to help someone else that is his best showing of character. But I like that it doesn't end up being necessarily what his idea of chivalry would be, because it didn't end up being this big glorious thing, his big glorious victory, because in the end, it wasn't his sword that won the day in that. And I just think that is really an interesting way to handle that. So, yeah. Unfortunately, you are going to have, with this era, you're going to have the poor treatment of the Jews, but I feel like it had to be in there. I think that to do otherwise would have been glaringly inaccurate, because this was a point where I want to say that actually there was a really bad destruction of a Jewish town because I want to say it's because of plague during Richard's time. If I remember, it's a long time since I read about that. But Richard's hands were not completely clean in the treatment of the Jews. And it was a time period of resentment, of hatred towards the Jews. And it would have been disdain. It would have been horribly inaccurate. And it would, if you're going to make a comment on the dark side of chivalry, I think it's important to even show how the culture at the time affected even your most heroic characters with these mindsets that are definitely not good mindsets. And for the modern reader, it can be jarring. But as someone who, reads a lot in this history, this is why I say Ivanhoe is not necessarily the most historically accurate, but it does what a lot of historical stories might miss, which is it gets the feel. It gets the feel of what chivalry was beyond the over-romanticized idea of chivalry. It gets the idea of the way that the anti-Semitism of that time period, because it's only like, I want to say a generation or two later before, I want to say it was I think it was Edward Longshanks the Hammer of the Scots. I want to say it was during his period of time that all the Jews were finally kicked out of England. So I believe that was him, and I think that's 2 generations past John. I want to say that's John's grandson. Might be his great-grandson, but I want to say it's John's grandson. So, yes, I think that was important. No, it's not pleasant to see. But I actually think that Isaac and Rebecca are 2 of the most complex characters in the story. Some people might not enjoy the way that Isaac is represented, but I feel like the author actually does a pretty good job of explaining why Isaac behaves the way he does. And I think that, of course, Wamba and Gurth are very well represented on the side of the Saxon serfs. Yes, Sir Walter Scott takes some liberties with the facts. He adds this serf's collar that was not a thing. But the way he gets it right, where he gets it right, is in the feel of the time period, and that I really appreciate. That I am willing to overlook a lot for someone who doesn't write something that feels modern, or even modern for his era, something that feels like it could have been during that time period. And sometimes that can be enough. This is a great story. There's a lot going on in here. I would definitely recommend Ivanhoe to anybody. I could easily start reading this again. But I need to run. I am actually a little bit over time. But if you haven't already done so, read Ivanhoe. It's a great story. And yeah, I don't think there's much more I can say about it. Hope that you enjoyed this review, and I will see you the next time. God bless. Bye-bye.
Books keep coming home with me. Piles so tall, they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea. Reading always feels so free.